From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Van-Schie, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joel Mitchell. Hello, Joel.
I think that in the last 2 days, I've had a week's worth of meetings, so I'm really glad that I've got the next 2 days of extended weekend to look forward to.
I'm glad, you took my advice and took the day off after Australia Day, so commonly called CBF Day in Australia.
Yeah, like 90% of Australia, I will also be sleeping.
Yeah, no, nice. So hopefully you don't throw your sleep cycle out too bad like you did in that 2 weeks of holidays.
That was 2 weeks. I think I can't do too much damage over a 4-day period. Yeah,
no, that's right.
I'll give it a good try though.
Yeah, give it a good college try.
I'll do my best.
No, sleep's good, and it's good to recharge every now and again.
Yep.
Even though the year's only started, it's like it started off at a gallop.
Yeah, it's been a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's nice to build in some rest. I'm doing a bit of tennis at the moment, so I'm finding that's a good kind of release.
Yeah, I've noticed all of the tennis that's been happening.
Yeah, we haven't really noticed the tennis. You've seen the aftermath of the tennis, which is a lot of sweat and BO.
Well, when I've had to listen to all of the tennis talk as well, which is probably worse.
Yeah.
I can generally avoid the BO, but I can't avoid listening to you all talk about tennis incessantly.
Yeah. I don't know. You could learn to love it.
I don't want to.
Tolerate it?
I already tolerate it.
To a degree.
I do. You want me to be intolerant? I can be intolerant.
Sure you could. Hey, we've got a guest today.
As we often do.
From the UK. I think this will come out after our 2-year episode.
Yeah, this will be, I don't know when, March probably sometime.
So we're actually over 100 guests now that have been on the podcast. Yeah. We did announce that on our 2-year. So, we love having guests on. This one's from the UK, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Let's go then.
Cool. So this person has over a decade of experience applying an evidence-based approach, which we like, to workplace performance. She's an advocate for ethical and accessible health technology for all and is currently working on her doctorate in organisational psychology. A warm welcome to the podcast, Nicola Hemmings.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, Nikki, it is great to have you on. We first met late last year, I believe, in London when there was a wellbeing conference on. And, we bonded over our love for evidence-based systemic approaches and the Psych Health and Safety podcast.
Absolutely.
So as soon as I heard you're a listener and we're very much on the same page in terms of our worldview, I thought, it'd be great to get you on. So, glad that you could make it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Cool.
So you prefer Nikki over Nicola?
Yes. So when I first moved to London many moons ago, I updated all my social media, my LinkedIn, Twitter, to Nicola because I thought it sounded more professional. And it absolutely hasn't stuck at all. So all of my social media, sort of online presence is Nicola, but I can go by either. But Nikki tends to work. If I use Nicola in Europe, everyone thinks I'm a man, which has got into tricky situations. So.
And Joel's picking me up on that, and you're probably aware it's on brand for me to muck up people's names. I'm just going what's on the screen at the moment on Riverside. You've put in Nikki, so I'm assuming that is the preferred name.
That's fine. It's just that it says Nicola on my page here, so I didn't want to.
It was on Nicola. Yeah. It said Nicola here as well, but I thought, no, I know that people like to be called by their actual names or preferred names. And so I went by what she typed in. Yeah.
Instead of asking first.
Yeah. But thanks for checking, Joelle.
I was checking for me,
okay.
Not for you. But, way to centre it on yourself.
Yeah.
It's your jam, right?
Yeah, it's on brand.
It is. Yeah. Nikki, what podcast do you like to listen to?
Oh, I love this question so much. So I think my world is very oxpsych at the moment. I do it in work, and I'm doing my doctorate as well. So I try to listen to things that are totally different, just to try and switch off. But I love learning. I constantly need sort of that stimulation. So I really enjoy podcasts on sort of the English language or on history. So I really like a podcast called The Illusionist, which just sort of gives the background to words and where they came from and the history behind things, which I really enjoy. And then there is a podcast called The Rest is History, where two quite posh English guys talk about history, and just the eloquence is ridiculous. I'd love to have a vocabulary like them. And they're just so knowledgeable about really niche parts of history. So they recently did a series on the World Cup where they went through each of the countries and sort of talked about a random thing from that country, like beavers in Canada. It was very interesting. And then when things get really dark and I get a bit overwhelmed with everything that's going on in the world at the moment and climate change and everything. And one of my favorites is called The Fall of Civilization. It's long form. Each podcast is at least an hour, some of 3. And it just talks about these different civilizations that sort of came to power and then absolutely crumbled. So the Ottoman Empire, Roman Empire. And it's sort of a dark way. It's nice to be like, oh, we've done this all before. But he's fantastic. The passion that each of these people have for their area and the detail they go into, everything from recreating music from that period in time and their followers, taking part and reading out different bits of Old English or wherever the location's from is fascinating. So there's a couple in there, but those sort of the ones I go between when I'm clicking on my podcasts.
Those are really, really niche, nerdy podcasts, and I love it.
Yeah, no one's mentioned those before.
No. I like Cautionary Tales with Tim Harford. That's a good one.
Yeah, big fan of
similar.
It's not about you, Joelle. It's about Nikki.
I'm saying it's a similar theme to the ones that Nikki has been talking about in terms of like going into depth with historic events and exploring what was going on.
Let's go with that.
Connecting and empathizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Jason.
Passed the Turing test.
Valuable input as always.
Yeah, always.
Tell us about your professional career, Nikki.
Please.
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Enough that I have to tell my kids to add please.
So polite. And you also nicely. Sure. So I think if you like sort of look back at my CV or LinkedIn, it kind of looks like I planned it. But I can say to this, especially who are early career, that I absolutely didn't plan each of the stages that I went through. I was incredibly lucky that very early in my career I worked in L&D, learning and development, and I was very fortunate enough to have to test out all of the solutions that we were wanting to use in the organisation. So I got to do very early on strengths-based exercises, values-based exercises. So I really understood sort of my personality and what I liked. So I think it's easier to start with what those are. So my values are science, art, and fun. And you can really see some of those come out in some of the roles that I've taken. And those values are the reason why I've taken certain roles as well, because I've seen the opportunity in different organizations. And then I've got strengths sort of around, I love developing others, empathy, Jason. So I've got one of really empathetic, enthusiastic, and I love strategy as well. So those are the kind of things I'm always drawn to. And I sort of pick up opportunities when they come along. And actually, I think the majority of my roles I've got through Twitter. I think that will stop now. But just from networking, seeing other people, talking to people and having roles come up, that's kind of, they've kind of come about. But in terms of history, I did I've always been interested in people, really interested in people watching, understanding how people work, but never studied psychology at school. So I took a bit of a leap of faith and did psychology undergrad. and did a year out in neuropsych. So I worked in a head injury ward, so people who had strokes or car accidents, etc. So small beds, there's only 12 beds, and I was an assistant to a clinical psychologist, and just loved it, found it fascinating, loved working there, but just knew that clinical wasn't for me, because I could see the impact of these hugely traumatic events, not just on the person who'd experienced it, who sadly, I was helping them learn how to email again, learn how to walk, learn how to talk, and they would never get fully better, but we could help them, get to stages. But what was interesting was the impact it had on the family, that the people around them just were not coping. They didn't have the coping skills to deal with that huge life shift and being, taking on this caregiver role. And that's what I thought was interesting, is how can we build these skills in the general population? And that's what I was interested in workplace psychology, because you've got a population all in one place that you can sort of influence positively and help support. So that's kind of the background to sort of where I started and my career and sort of the roles that I took. So after my undergrad, I had a bit of self-reflection. I was like, I'm far too young to know what to do and where to go. So I'm going to travel the world, get some life experience, not do a master's, just see what's out there. So I went to Australia, classic Brit, did a bit of traveling, worked in New Zealand for a bit. And I also worked in marketing, which I thought was really interesting. Like I said previously when we were having a bit of a chat, it's not just about the interventions that you're doing, but it's how you market it, how you bring your stakeholders, and how you talk about it. So I think I subtly built up a lot of skills in that area around how do you market goods and how do you talk to people, and sort of get your point across. So that was fascinating. Then I did a master's in London, so at City University in occupational psychology. Really enjoyed that, and after that I had a research assistant role and several other roles that came from that. And since then I've been working in various roles in very small startups or my own consultancy or larger companies, all about helping people make better decisions. And, although I might not have realized at the time, trying to do evidence-based practice. And more recently, I've been headhunted back in early 2017 to work in the digital space. So working in digital mental well-being, digital health, where I've been for a couple of years now, sort of designing, developing, delivering, and evaluating digital solutions in the workplace. And that's where I am now. So I'm head of workplace psychology, and doing, similar things, trying to do evidence-based practice, trying to, push the whole sector forward, as you guys are as well, and sort of sharing good practice in the workplace. I think that's a bit of an overview.
And how much fruit did you pick while you were in Australia?
None. I would probably eat too much if I did. I was very lucky, I think. And I had a friend who was going out at the same time, and we met whilst doing these marketing roles.
Yeah, she would have worked the cellar door, I reckon.
Cellar door, yeah.
I actually worked as a limo driver for a drop zone, as a skydiving company. So I'd pick people up and drop them off at the airport, and then jump out of a plane, and I'd take them back again. So it was the weirdest job I've ever had, because I'm not particularly good at driving.
How's your skydiving?
Not good. You're meant to banana, and I absolutely, oranged. I went into and I'm quite long, like it doesn't come across obviously in video, but I'm 6'1". So this poor guy who took pity on me and jumped out with me, he must have been, I don't know, he was definitely short. He was in the 5-somethings.
You tandem, so he was behind you. Like, oh wow, yeah, that would have been awkward.
It was quite awkward, and I'd worked there for a couple of months, so I kind of knew that everyone had gone to the pub before. I knew who'd packed the parachutes. Scared. Like I don't think I should have done it at the beginning rather than afterwards.
Yeah. You don't want to know how the meat, like the sausages are made, right? No.
Yeah, more life experience.
Mate, well, I'm glad that you lived to tell the story.
Thanks, me too.
The world would be better for it. Now, you actually have a lot of similarities, I guess, in your career with Joelle, in that you both are head of, and you both got headhunted for those roles. So,
and we both had careers that were entirely unplanned.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but look planned. Everything
Yes.
looks like it's under control.
It does. It looks like a very strategic trajectory.
You probably spent too long at the regulator, but you're just waiting for the right role to be headhunted for.
Yeah, family stuff as well. When you're public service is family friendly generally. So, yeah.
Sure. Now, Nikki, you're doing your doctorate at Birkbeck at the moment, almost at the end of that. We've had a couple of people from Birkbeck before, in Kevin Teo and Rob Briner. So it seems to be a good source of talented, very thoughtful, charismatic people. So tell us, what are you focusing on at Birkbeck at the moment in your studies?
Yeah, sure. So I said I like to think I'm near the end, but we'll see. So it's a 4-year course. I'm in my 4th year, just started. I'm really interested in mental wellbeing guidance for SMEs, so small, medium enterprises, kind of what's out there, what's being applied, and how can we do better. I've previously worked, like I said, in multiple different sizes of companies, but most recently working in small companies who are targeting large enterprise companies. But SMEs make up, I think, over 99% of the population is in the UK, and I think globally it's very similar. And I'm really passionate about the innovation that the SMEs have for the country and just for globally, what can be done in small companies, yet they just don't have the resources to be able to even understand that, that they might need support, and therefore in order to put it into place. So I'm really interested in that, and that's what I'm working on, discovering more on sort of pushing the research a little bit forward in that area where I can.
Yeah, we'll have to connect you in with a good friend of ours from the podcast, Angela Martin, who has a bit of experience in small business in particular. But like you say, it's a different audience than what's typical. I mean, even for us, working with companies smaller than 250 people doesn't really make a lot of sense because they don't actually have the internal resources to actually execute a program. But like you say, they represent such a large proportion of total companies and a large proportion of the total workforce. And so, there's some real challenges there without the resources and the internal kind of competence and capacity, I guess, to do good work in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to my previous point about working with the families of people who've experienced brain injury, that if you can help the vast majority of the population through a structure which happens to be work, then, as a society, we can really help support ourselves. I think now it's happening in schools where we're being taught how to look after ourselves. But definitely, as an elder millennial, we just weren't really talked about that at all. And so we're kind of having to figure it out for ourselves. And I'm a psychologist. I love a structure and a process and a framework. So if I can do anything around that and, help apply it in the workplace, then all the better, I think.
Absolutely.
So we're keen to hear about some of your doctorate projects in a bit more detail. So you've done some work looking at burnout in entrepreneurs. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I have. I promise I'm not being paid by Birkbeck. It's a fantastic course. The first 2 years are very project-based. It's a very practical course, which really drew me to it. I'm a pracademic, a practical academic. So the first 2 years are you're writing up your work that you're doing whilst you're working. So everyone works full-time, either in their own business or in an organisation during the course. And the first 2 years, you're writing up projects that you're doing as part of your work based on the different areas of psychology. So one of those projects that I conducted was, as you said, looking at burnout in entrepreneurs. I'm quite connected with the entrepreneurial network in Bristol. So I'm based in Bristol, UK, where I was. We're currently moving. And through my connections, probably through Twitter, I was speaking with the head of the Bristol firm called Set Squared. And they are a conglomerate of various universities that come together and help support entrepreneurs in Bristol, kind of like an incubator. So they provide coaching and support to set up people's business, help with funding, etc. And this was towards the end of 2020. So I think globally we were pretty knackered anyway. And then obviously as an entrepreneur in the area, not only do you have all the pressures of being an entrepreneur anyway, but it's an incredibly difficult place to be, lots of uncertainty. So we were really looking at helping support a preventative approach to burnout, and making sure that founders felt supported as part of their going through. So I did an evidence-based approach, and I've actually written a blog post about it. Do you have show notes that I could link it in? Excellent. So I'll link it in that. So if anyone wants to find out more. But we went through the whole evidence-based approach of really asking the question, what are the factors that impact entrepreneurial burnout? And personally, I found this fascinating because I'd worked in preventative burnout in large organizations, but obviously, what is different from an entrepreneurial population? And I think there's a fantastic paper on it that sort of laid everything out. So I really used that paper to sort of help guide some of the processes. So I acquired data and information. So I interviewed some of the current entrepreneurs, asked them about the situation, what sort of challenges that they're going through, what was happening with them, what was sort of going on in their world. Gathered all this information, sort of saw what was going on, looking at the empirical evidence on entrepreneurs, what the stakeholders were saying. So interviewing not only the entrepreneurs, but also their coaches, who are, ex-entrepreneurs who'd been through it all before, reviewing what resources are available, because they're linked to universities. There's a lot of information within universities that entrepreneurs can access, but might not necessarily know is available. So I did a big review from that and shared that immediately. So we made sure that the entrepreneurs knew these links and what was out there. And also really sort of reflecting my own opinion of what was going on as a practitioner and how I was sort of putting this data together. I then used a concept from Lucy Yardley. It's called the person-based approach. And it's really putting the person in the center of the intervention. So asking them, okay, what does this person, want to do? What are their goals? And what are the challenges that they might have to be able to get there? So I created this persona, your classic entrepreneur, based on the interviews that I put together. So I think, they had a name, they had a photo and a classic day in their lives and kind of what they were up against. I think I had two actually. So one sort of younger one just coming out of university and they're trying to bring to market their PhD research, and another one who was working at the same time and had a family and were trying to sort of juggle some of the challenges that come with that. And from those personas, I then created a bit of a framework, so guiding principles as to what the intervention needed to look like. And one of the principles was around just disconnecting from work. It's really, really hard for entrepreneurs to switch off, especially because they very rarely have an office. I mean, Set Squared does provide a space where they can work, but you're always working, you're always on. There's very little boundaries between home and life. Often family have committed money towards your business as well. So it's very blurred boundaries, and actually just being able to totally switch off and be somewhere else was a really important part of the intervention. And then obviously there were some key things that came up, like social support and understanding what burnout is, et cetera, et cetera. So once I had this structure, I definitely implemented sort of my values of science, art, and fun. Came up with a few different concepts, and finally landed on this idea of mission to Mars. Because a big key point that came from
because you love Twitter.
Yeah. Should have linked that in. I think there might have been a reference to that. And yeah, one of the key factors with entrepreneurs is just the loneliness you feel. And I really link that to being in space. You just feel that you're just so disconnected from everyone else who, you know, have normal jobs and 9 to 5s. It's just a different world. So created this intervention. So it's 3 sets of 1 hour, so 3 1 hour sessions. And you go on a mission to Mars and various different challenges along the way. It's all virtual. So I'm very much...
Oh, so you don't actually go to Mars?
Disappointing.
Yeah, well, what a letdown. Hopefully that's in the disclaimer at the beginning. Yeah.
Honestly.
Do not actually go to Mars.
Way to bury the lead.
I've been talking with Set Squared about budgets, but current budgets don't stress that. But I'm very much saying this is MVP. We don't know what.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What the next iteration is. So it's online with various videos, and you have to dress up. So an entrepreneur turns up to this. They have to gather their crew. So between at least 2 people to 5 people, it could be their whole team, all turn up. They have to dress up whatever they want in terms of mission to Mars. It could be an astronaut, it could be an alien.
Toga.
Yeah. Sure.
Cowboys and Indians.
I mean, in the weightlessness of space, I'm not sure that a toga would be appropriate work attire.
Yeah, true.
I'm just not thinking practically, Jason.
No, she's confirmed we're not actually going into space.
All right.
Actually, are we going into orbit? Like you said, Mars is out of the question. But
there's orbit. There's there might be a small touchdown on the moon on the way there.
Okay, just not Mars.
Little comfort break. Eventually, you do get to Mars. I don't know about. I think isn't it crushing gravity on Mars? Don't know. I have to look it up. But I'm not sure.
There's a documentary on it called The Martian with Matt Damon.
And Matt Damon went to Mars that time with his documentary crew. Yeah.
I've actually suggested sound effects as part of the course, so really getting into it. And the Martian soundtrack is one of the backing tracks that entrepreneurs can play whilst going through the course. Anyway, as you can tell, it does
sound like fun, and creative.
Yeah, it's very silly. It's very fun, but everything is science-based. So the first section talks about the body-mind connection, the importance of sustaining yourself, bringing a snack. There's a bit about personal identity, because you do lose who you are as an entrepreneur. It becomes 100% of you, rather than understanding, actually, this is a separate part of me that I can carry on. I'm not just an entrepreneur. And psychological detachment, so the ability to switch off. How are you switching off? How are you changing your roles? So that's just in the first section, all very hidden science, and at the end, there's sort of a reveal. The second one talks about social support. So how are you building your social connections? You're writing a letter home to people. Who are you writing to? What are you saying? And also talks about the conservation of resources theory. So how are you collecting your resources and building them together in order to survive on your journey? And then the final one, you go into hypersleep, otherwise known as mindfulness. So it's really introducing subtly the concept of mindfulness, because for some people it might be a bit of a barrier, sort of the stigma behind that. And also the concept of values. So a struggle for entrepreneurs is making decisions that might go against their values. So if they understand what they are first and upfront, then they can better navigate that. And throughout this, there's mission checkpoints where you do a burnout questionnaire and a well-being questionnaire just to see where you are. And if people are coming up with high burnout, there's an emergency burnout procedure that they can go through as well, just to make sure we're triaging people to help immediately. Because the course is designed for prevention rather than a cure for burnout. So it's just great fun. I really enjoy creating it. We've rolled it out. We've tested it with one group of entrepreneurs. We've made some iterations, and we're just working with Set Squared to get some funding to update some of the branding, because I'm definitely a psychologist and not a UX designer. PowerPoint.
Yeah. I understand. My sister's a graphic designer, and she says, Jason, as a graphic designer, you make a great psychologist. So, it's different skill sets, right? You need,
Plus, you're colorblind as well, so there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, using my unique perspective. Now, look, obviously I've gone through the entrepreneurial journey myself, Nikki, so a lot of that, really resonates with me, what you're talking about, the challenges and whatnot. So, yeah, no, it's incredibly interesting work. And there's obviously a growing number of people who are going down that route in terms of, the traditional way of working. Traditional workplaces is not for them, and there's more opportunities, I guess, to explore entrepreneurialism as well through accelerators and other programs.
Absolutely, and I highly encourage it. It's quite a journey, but there's a lot happening in the air. It's very exciting.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode. Hey, another thing you're working on is developing an organisational maturity model based on HR-owned mental health strategies. What approach have you used in that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure sort of where your listeners are and sort of what they're involved in, but this might be more relevant. So you've got the entrepreneurial project, which was fascinating, really useful. And then this is kind of the flip side. This is for larger enterprises, this project. And it came from the fact that I'm literally doing a thesis on what guidance is out there around mental health and mental well-being. So I'm very invested, I'm very motivated, and I'm making time to read all this guidance. But there's so much of it. There's so much out there. And as a educated person of wisdom, critical thinking, I can try and navigate it, but I still struggle to. And I was really working, okay, how can we reduce some of these barriers to people implementing some of this guidance? And that's why I came up with this concept of the organizational mental health maturity model. I'm, again, awful at like naming things. So it's definitely a working title. But the idea is that as an organization, you would understand where you are in the continuum of your journey with mental health and mental well-being, starting from absolutely first days. So might do basic health and safety, but that's kind of it. Very, very sort of risk-averse approach, but nothing preventative or proactive. And then the next step one would be sort of, your classic fruit in the kitchen and yoga, that kind of thing. It's a very individualistic approach. It's on the individual to help get support. And going through 5 steps right up to total innovation. So a company has totally integrated all of their well-being solutions. There isn't a well-being team. It's just what everyone does. It's part of the strategy. It's totally inbuilt, and they are innovating in new ways on how it can be done. Whatever that might be, like using VR or, outreach to society and to their supply chain. So they're going above and beyond the company themselves. And so I created this by looking at what guidance was out there already, but also what maturity models was out there already. And I did use an evidence-based approach, but there's just not a lot of evidence. Because how could you do a study on an organization to understand where it is? Like, I don't know how you would even start doing that study. So it is a more theoretical project and more sort of light guidance. But I sort of mapped out the different stages, and I've mapped out the different guidance based on the different stages, and tested it with a group of HRDs who said it's incredibly useful. I mean, most of them asked for a copy of it, which is always a good sign that it's useful. And And yeah, I think it still needs to evolve. There's still iterations, but it basically breaks down what guidance you should start applying before doing other things. So, for example, there's no point doing manager training and rolling out support for your managers if you haven't understood the stakeholders in your organization and who you need to influence and started working with them and building up some champions in order to understand how a manager training might land, to then do the manager training, to then get data from that in order to work on your next iteration. So it's kind of like a timeline, and it's really helpful as well because organizational change takes years, and having these stages just lays out, going from stage to stage can take, 1 to 3 years. We're not going to be a wellbeing organization overnight. It's going to take time, and it's a nice sort of roadmap of for an organization to really break down what is the one thing that we need to do now, rather than being overwhelmed with multiple options. So that was another really good fun project. No dressing up, but it was still very fun.
No, it's something, like we're quite interested in that area as well. Like you say, there's really not a lot of good models that are out there. And so, we did something similar through our own experience, looking at mental health maturity in a workplace, really ranging from, those companies that when they first get involved are more focused on the individual and more reactive approaches. So essentially taking a public health model and then shoehorning it into a workplace context. And then looking at, when you get matured, like you're saying, it is embedded into business as usual. But it's a shared responsibility where the organisation is developing systems and processes to keep people well and promote wellbeing, but the individual also knows what they can do as well. So taking more of a systemic preventative approach at the more mature and embedded as well. The other thing we did was create a mental health benchmark tool, which also looked at systems maturity. So we identified, looking at the integrated model against, prevent harm, promote wellbeing, and support ill health. What were the common interventions or systems that companies used under each of those pillars? So under the respond to ill health, for example, you've got peer mental health networks, and you've got EAP. Under promote wellbeing, you've got positive work design and mental wellbeing apps and training. And then under prevent harm, you've got things like management systems like ISO, and you've got psychosocial risk management, that process. So doing that, then we thought about maturity of each of those systems. And again, similar to what you've outlaid there, like early stages about awareness raising, there's a focus on the individual and maybe some education. But when you get to the later stages, then it is all about continuous improvement and, making, innovating and making iterative improvements to ensure that you're getting and got data to take that evidence-based approach, right? So you can ensure that once we've applied this system in this context, that it is actually driving the desired benefits.
Oh, absolutely. No, they sound, very complementary. And I think a useful framework that I often use, like I said, psychologists love a framework, is the IGLU model by Nielsen. So it's individual, group, leader, organization, and other, and just checking that there are interventions under all of them. Because we've really focused on the individual for a very long time. It's easier to measure, easier to create, and easier to roll out, and they do work, but it's making sure we have those group leader and organizational support as well across them.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I just had a conversation today, just in the last couple of hours, actually, with a continuous improvement professional. And he was talking about the model that they use. And it's like you're saying, you've got organization, you've got leader, you've got team, and then you've got individual. What we're seeing a lot with psychological health and safety is a lot of it is focused on like an organizational level risk assessment, which then generally leads to high level controls like, we've got policies and we've got education programs and that sort of thing. But like you say, you really need to get down to that leader and the team level as well if you want the benefit to be felt at the individual level. The closer you get to the individual, obviously, including direct intervention at the individual level, the greater the benefit is likely to be observed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I find the group things fascinating. I don't know, that's because of my work with the SMEs as well. But if you've got, 10 people in a team, how are they working together? How are they supporting each other? And I'd like to see more coming up on the market in support groups at a group level. And there are already things out there. Making more clarity around that, I think would be really helpful. I think there's a lot happening, which is fantastic.
So with the remaining time in your doctorate, you're exploring mental health support for small and medium enterprises. So we've already sort of talked about that and why you've chosen to look at SMEs in particular. So can you take us through what you've done so far with that project?
Yeah, definitely. So I've talked about two of the projects in my first 2 years that were very evidence-based approach based on my work. The final 2 years of the doctorate is kind of your traditional thesis. And it's a professional doctorate, so it's incredibly practical and condensed. So the first year and my last year was doing a systematic literature review. So asking a question, going out there, what literature is around on this topic. So I was looking at my question was around what mental wellbeing guidance is out there for SMEs in the UK. And I came up with 7 separate guidance and analysed them using a measure that evaluates the quality of guidance. Interestingly, none of them came out very well. The NICE guidance in National Institute of Clinical Excellence came out the best, but they still didn't do very well in terms of this very sort of analytical approach to measuring guidance. And even in that guidance, it's not applicable for SMEs, and they actually state, there isn't enough research on SMEs in order to create guidance. And they're incredibly detailed, and they lay out sort of the research questions that they would like to look at moving forward in terms of building research in this area. So that was really interesting. So I'm currently writing that up and sort of aggregating that data and putting it into a bit of a narrative.
Nikki, before we move on, that's actually a really good observation, and definitely something that it might be news for some listeners who think, well, the practice and science of psychology has been around for like years, decades. Surely you know everything by now, but like you say, with a lot of things, it is very low evidence base.
Yeah. And I think I really like the idea of having evidence-informed practice and being very clear that something's evidence-based. So you have a protocol or a specific research paper that states, we did this intervention in this population, and you can, create that as closely as possible, or evidence-informed practice where you're looking at, okay, this happened here. We're going to do something similar, but we're going to make sure we're measuring and testing to see if it does work. And I really like that approach.
Yeah, I'm really going to say a lot of people forget about that, the remeasuring. They go, well, no, it's evidence-based because, it worked in that context, and we're going to put it into a completely different context, but it's going to work the same, so we don't need to measure it. RIP, growth mindset. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I'm very passionate about measurement, but also asking the right question first. And that's the whole starting point of the evidence-based practice is the ask. So what question are you trying to answer? And does the intervention that you think link to that? No, absolutely. I'm continually shocked that we just lack research in certain areas. We think we're so far advanced, but actually there's some areas that there just isn't.
It's not just SMEs, right? Like because if you look at the World Health Organization and ILO's recommendations around mental health in the workplace, they list 12 different interventions, but most of them say very low evidence.
Yeah. So just as I finished my SLR, so my systematic literature review, the WHO guidance just came out.
Yeah.
Which is a bit sad, but with these things, you just need to draw a line in the sand and say, that's it. Otherwise, you're continually doing systematic literature reviews. And I'll write up my discussion. But it still wasn't, it was still very similar to some of the previous guidance that I'd looked at in terms of not really addressing some of the barriers and enablers that SMEs have in implementing this guidance. And yet all the papers I'm reading about SMEs, they're literally entitled, SMEs put in the too hard basket. We don't want to deal with them. There's so much difference across the population in SMEs. I'm probably going to be working in professional services, but I'd love to work, in hairdressing. How do hairdressers make sure they're managing their mental health? And they have people who often use it as a form of therapy, and they'll sort of disclose certain things. How are they managing that? There's so many different areas we can look at. So yes, so that's that's kind of where I am in terms of my SLR. And the reason I'm having a bit of a pause at the moment is I'm really thinking about, okay, what's next? What would be useful to create or to move research forward with, knowing that there isn't actually a lot of research to base this on. So even in my SLR, I found no papers on guidance. It was all grey literature. So that's research reports that aren't published in a scientific journal. So I think it will be something around co-creating guidance with SMEs, most probably in the Bristol area, looking to develop something that's really, I'm hoping to take an action research approach and a positive approach as well. So rather than saying, these are the guidance, why can't you do these? What are the barriers? Going, okay, as an SME, what's helpful? This is the conservation of resource theory. These are the resources that you might have. How can we build on these and work from them? And I think I've still got, the organizational maturity model in my mind as well, about meeting people where they are, meeting organizations where they are, rather than sort of dumping on them, this is what you need to do, everything at the same time. But that's still TBC. I can come back on your third anniversary and give you some more background into where I've got to.
So do you have any next steps planned out yet for your research, or are you still in the contemplating phase?
I'd say still contemplating. I need to get in my ethics approval ASAP. That's due before Christmas. But again, I just don't want to rush it. I want to make sure I'm, doing things properly and thinking about things within reason. I do need to get a bit of a wiggle on now.
That's what ethics amendments are for, Nikki. Just get it in, and then you can change it later.
Yeah, I know. I need to plan the workshops in detail in order to get them signed off. And there's a practicality, in the research I'm looking at, they had SMEs in workshops for 3 full days. And to ask anyone in a small business, and I'm looking specifically at businesses between 10 and 50 people, because less than 10, it's most likely that they're probably a family business or there's some kind of family connection, and that entirely changes the dynamics of mental health and the situation. And anything more than 50, you've usually got some kind of HR support coming in who would be help to implement the guidance. But yeah, just the practicalities of getting people in a room to talk about this. Like I said, I'm a practical academic, so I'm trying to balance the two at the moment, making sure I've got some good research, but I can get it done on time.
And so recognising that you don't have ethics approval yet, so you're technically not allowed to engage with participants. Yeah. If people wanted to maybe go on a shortlist to be contacted at some later date in time, how could they contact you?
This sounds entirely ethical.
Yeah.
Yes. So absolutely, I am not able to recruit. I need ethics before that. But if
that's the disclaimer, and now on the pitch.
Anyone wanted just to contact me about generally my work, I love having conversations and just checking in, seeing where people are, talking about what we're all trying to do at the moment, which is help boost mental well-being in the workplace. Then contact me on my LinkedIn's probably best. I think I'm probably stepping away from Twitter. I'm not a blue certified person, which I think you have to be now. So check me a message on LinkedIn, Nicola Hemmings, not Nikki Hemmings. And it'd be great to chat. But like I said, I'm not recruiting just yet, and I can't because of ethics, but happy to have a conversation. For sure.
Awesome. And Nikki, it's been a great conversation today. One of the questions that we like to ask all of our guests when they come on is, if you were to look into the future, what would your hopes for the future of workplace mental health look like?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. So I think there's kind of 3 things for me. So integration accessibility, and ethics. So at the moment, there are some really fantastic things happening. Also some not so fantastic things, but there are some really good things, but they're just not connected. And we need to have this continuum of care where people feel supported throughout their mental health journey, no matter where they are. And it's linked, it's connected. We're designing systems for people who might not be able to have the cognition to access the care themselves. Filling out forms, trying to get access to care, it takes a lot of time. Having this integration, I think, really helps. And that kind of links to access as well. Obviously, like I work in digital tech, so making sure people have access to the technology, but also that the technology is accessible, that we've got great UX, it's easy to use, we don't put these barriers up in place. And then ethics as well, it's so important. And I do see we're doing some good stuff in this space. I'm really grateful for companies like Orkra in the UK, who now work with the NHS, and One Mind Cyber Guide in the US. They rate health apps because it is a wild west out there in terms of anyone can create an app and say it's for mental health. So they're doing some great work on that. And there is regulations out there, and it's a balance of making sure we've got strict regulations, but also not hampering innovation at the same time. So it's the combination of making sure we're getting integrated, accessible, ethical mental health support in the workplace. No small ask, but that'd be great.
Yeah, I definitely, the first one there, integration, really resonates with me. Just see too many activities happening in a vacuum or to the side, and that's not sustainable for practice. It's kind of like, this is kind of like the new glossy thing. We'll do it for a short period of time and then forget about it. It needs to be integrated to be sustainable and have longevity.
Yeah, exactly. And collaboration across companies as well. Making sure we're all working together, all trying to do good. So yeah, definitely. Those are really the three things for me.
And do you have some words of advice for listeners who want to work in the field of psych health and safety?
Oh my goodness. Do it. We need more of us. So I think it'd be around playing to your strengths, understanding, what motivates you, what drives you, and really playing to those, whatever they look like. Bringing together your stakeholders. I think I've touched on it before, that it's not just the intervention, it's the application and the rollout, and you really need to work out, okay, who do you need to influence? What are their strengths? What are their motivations? And how can you help support that? And then obviously evidence-based approach to decision making. So helping make better organizational decisions. Absolutely. So going through a lot of Rob Reiner's stuff is fantastic, and implementing some of that. So yes, I think strengths, evidence-based approach, know your stakeholders.
I must admit, I do screenshot a lot of Rob Reiner's posts where he puts up a nice diagram as like these like you say, the models, the frameworks, Nikki. So I do like that.
Oh no, he's great. So Rob and some previous colleagues, so Craig Tyndall and Emily Pepin, we set up a sort of support group in the UK a while back.
For recovering evidence-based practitioners.
Yeah. So HR, L&D, anyone, people functions or academics. Another fantastic title, Evidence-Based HR Forum, EBHRF. Not catchy, but it was great. We ran it for 2 years, and it was just us coming together, being like, we're trying to do evidence-based practice. It's hard, it's not easy. And sort of standing up and saying, I'm a evidence-based practitioner, but I did this about adding in management. So a safe space to talk about things.
But I ran an MBTI workshop.
I signed up in a MBTI. It's a safe space. That was fantastic. We, had a really good network. And we ended up wrapping it up, pandemic and everything was hard to do face to face. But I'd like to see more of those, happening, us coming together as practitioners and being honest, be like, yeah, this is really hard, but there are structures, there are systems that we can use to make better decisions in the workplace.
And where can Jason come with his toga to go to Mars?
I'll send you the link, Jason.
Yeah, and we'll put it in the show notes for the listeners. Can we do that? Can we share?
I'm not sure about sharing the program because it's still part of our development with Set Square.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I've definitely got the blog post that we wrote about the program and what we did and what it's about.
Yeah, that'd be cool to share. Yeah. It sounds pretty fun. We should do an escape room sometime. That's what I'm thinking of.
As long as you promise to wear regular clothes and not a toga.
We should dress up.
But can we have a no togas rule? I'm really concerned about this toga situation.
I will wear something underneath. It's not like a kilt.
Isn't it? Yeah. How do you know?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
There you go.
Anyway, Nikki, we obviously have felt very comfortable in your presence today, and thank you for at least appearing likewise.
Thank you for tolerating our nonsense.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Lovely to chat.
Yeah, great chatting. And, hopefully we can have you on next year after we've celebrated our 3rd-year anniversary to hear about the results of your research.
Definitely. We can celebrate 3rd anniversary and my completion of my doctorate. So that's a nice deadline.
Yeah, the first manned mission to Mars, and there's a few things we'll be able to celebrate there, yeah.
I'll bring my toga.
Yeah, nice.
Who knows what could happen in the next 12 months.
Well, listeners, that brings us to the end of another episode. Remember, we do video these when we interview our guests, and you'll be able to find those videos on the FlourishDX YouTube channel. You'll also be able to find snippets from these conversations on the FlourishDX LinkedIn page. And while you're over on LinkedIn, make sure you follow Nicola, not to be confused with Nikki Hemmings, and Joel and I are over there as well if you want to continue the conversation. But that brings us to the end. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow FlourishDX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.